They made her check IDs at the main gate while they joked about the old lady working security, called her grandma guard and laughed when she struggled with the heavy checkpoint equipment. But when 5 armed terrorists breached the base perimeter during a VIP visit, this 54-year-old security guard did something that left the entire command staff speechless. That's when they saw the Delta Force tattoo on her wrist and realized they had no idea who they'd been disrespecting for 8 months. Hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from, because what happened during that lockdown changed everything they thought they knew about the quiet woman at the gate. They made her check IDs at the main gate while they joked about the old lady working security, called her grandma guard and laughed when she struggled with the heavy checkpoint equipment. But when 5 armed terrorists breached the base perimeter during a VIP visit, this 54-year-old security guard did something that left the entire command staff speechless. That's when they saw the Delta Force tattoo on her wrist and realized they had no idea who they'd been disrespecting for 8 months. Hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from, because what happened during that lockdown changed everything they thought they knew about the quiet woman at the gate. Morning, Grandma Guard, called out Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez as he flashed his ID at the checkpoint. Don't forget to take your time checking that, laughed Corporal Lisa Martinez. We've got all day. My actual grandmother moves faster through security, added Private Kevin Chen, shaking his head. Diana Walsh nodded quietly and scanned his identification card. 54 years old, grain brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, reading glasses that slipped down her nose, security uniform that seemed too big for her small frame. Have a good day, she said politely, handing back his ID. Try to stay awake out here, Grandma, Rodriguez replied with a smirk. The other guards laughed as they walked through the checkpoint. Diana kept working, but she heard every word. Had been hearing them for 8 months now. Fort Braxton's main gate was the first line of defense for one of the military's most sensitive installations, home to classified research, VIP briefings, and operations that never appeared in official records. And Diana Walsh was treated like the weak link in that security chain. Look at her squinting at those IDs, whispered Security Supervisor Sergeant Torres to his assistant. Probably can't even see half the details. Should we request a younger guard? Asked the assistant. Budget cuts. We get what we get. From her checkpoint booth, Diana heard the conversation, cataloged the dismissive tone, filed away information that security guards weren't supposed to process. Because Diana Walsh hadn't always checked IDs at a gate. Every morning at 06:00, Diana arrived at the checkpoint. She organized her station, tested the scanner equipment, and prepared for 8 hours of processing hundreds of personnel through the base's main entrance. Morning, Diana, Base Commander Colonel James Hayes would say as he passed through. Good morning, sir. Keep up the good work. Hayes was one of the few people who treated her with basic courtesy. Most others saw her as an obstacle to their morning routine. Come on, lady, I'm late for a briefing, Sergeant Kim would snap when Diana took time to properly examine suspicious documents. Can you move any slower? Lieutenant Morrison would complain when she followed protocol for visitor processing. But Diana wasn't just checking IDs. She was observing patterns, noting anomalies, identifying potential threats with eyes trained to see what others missed. It was a Thursday morning when the alert came through. General Patricia Williams, Joint Chiefs of Staff, arriving for an unscheduled classified briefing. High-value target, maximum security protocols. Walsh. Sergeant Torres barked. We've got VIP movement in 30 minutes. Try not to embarrass us. Yes, Sergeant. And for God's sake, speed up the processing. The general doesn't have time for your careful examination routine. Diana nodded and prepared her station for the increased traffic that always accompanied VIP visits. At 08:47 hours, she noticed the van, white commercial vehicle approaching the checkpoint. Nothing obviously suspicious. Proper markings for a catering company that had clearance for base access. But something was wrong. The driver's posture was too rigid. His passenger was scanning the checkpoint defenses rather than looking at paperwork. The van sat lower than it should for a vehicle supposedly carrying food supplies. Diana activated her silent alarm and processed the vehicle according to standard protocol. Purpose of visit? She asked the driver. Catering delivery for the general's briefing, he replied. His accent was slight but wrong for someone from the local company. "May I see your delivery authorization?" The paperwork was perfect, too perfect, the kind of flawless forgery that came from intelligence agencies with unlimited resources. "Please step out of the vehicle for inspection," Diana said calmly. The driver's hand moved toward something under his jacket. The passenger tensed. Diana was already moving. Her hand found the panic button that would lock down the entire base. Her other hand drew the sidearm that most people forgot security guards were authorized to carry. "Hands where I can see them." Now, the van doors burst open. 5 men in tactical gear with automatic weapons, professional, coordinated, deadly. But Diana Walsh had seen this before. In places that didn't officially exist, against enemies that the military didn't acknowledge. She dove behind the reinforced checkpoint barrier as the first shots rang out. Military-grade weapons, armor-piercing rounds. This wasn't a random attack. "Base security, checkpoint 1 under attack," she radioed with calm precision. 5 hostiles, full tactical gear, attempting to breach main gate. "Initiate lockdown protocols." The response came back immediately. "Roger. Checkpoint 1, security team en route." ETA 4 minutes. 4 minutes was too long. These weren't random terrorists. They knew exactly where they were going and what they were after. Diana moved with speed and precision that would have shocked anyone who'd seen her slowly checking IDs for 8 months. She flanked the attackers using cover routes she'd memorized during her first week on the job. Cover and movement, suppressive fire, tactical positioning. The first attacker went down to a perfect headshot from 40 yards. The second fell when Diana outflanked his position and caught him exposed. The remaining 3 tried to advance on the checkpoint building. Diana was already there, using the architecture like someone who'd studied the killing angles for months. By the time base security arrived, all 5 attackers were down. Diana was calmly securing their weapons and checking for additional threats. "Jesus Christ," breathed Security Chief Martinez as he surveyed the scene. "Walsh, what the hell happened here?" "Attempted breach during VIP arrival. 5 hostiles neutralized." "You neutralized 5 armed terrorists?" "Yes, sir." Martinez stared at the bodies. "Professional kills, perfect shot placement, no wasted ammunition. Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "Here and there." "That's not an answer. Security guards don't engage like this." Diana was reloading her weapon with movements that belonged in special operations training videos. "You wanted to know if I could handle security threats," she said quietly. "Now you know." Colonel Hayes arrived within minutes, followed by investigators and medical personnel. The attempted breach during a Joint Chiefs visit was a national security incident. "Walsh," Hayes approached her as she gave her statement to investigators. "I need to understand what just happened." 5-person team attempted to breach security during General Williams' arrival. Professional equipment and tactics. "This was a targeted operation." "And you stopped them?" "Alone." "Yes, sir." Hayes studied her carefully. "Who are you really?" Diana reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, she extracted an ID card that made Hayes step back. "Sergeant Major Diana Walsh, United States Army, retired," she said quietly. 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. 26 years of service. Hayes stared at the ID. "Your Delta Force." "Was retired 14 months ago after my final tour." "What were you doing for 26 years?" "Counterterrorism operations, protecting high-value targets in hostile environments." Hayes looked back at the checkpoint where investigators were processing the scene. "And you've been working security at my gate?" "I wanted something peaceful, something simple, somewhere I could use my skills to protect people without having to kill them." Hayes was quiet for a moment. "How many operations have you been on?" "That's classified, but enough to recognize a professional hit team when I see one." Word spread through the base within hours. The security guard everyone had been dismissing for months was actually one of the most elite soldiers in Army history. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez found Diana at the checkpoint that afternoon, still processing IDs like nothing had happened. "Ma'am, I need to apologize." "For what?" "For calling you Grandma Guard, for treating you like you didn't know what you were doing." Diana continued checking IDs. "You saw what you expected to see, a middle-aged woman in a security uniform. But you're Delta Force, a war hero." "I'm a security guard who used to do other things. Today I had to do other things again." Rodriguez was quiet. "Ma'am, how many terrorists have you stopped?" "Enough," Did you ever work with anyone I might know? Diana looked at him carefully. What unit were you with before this assignment? 75th Rangers, 2nd Battalion. Who was your unit? Sergeant Major. Sergeant Major Thompson. Big guy. Always wore his beret tilted just strong to piss off officers. I trained Thompson 8 years ago. Advanced close quarters combat. He was a good soldier. Rodriguez stared. You trained my sergeant major? I trained a lot of people, including how to spot threats that others might miss. The next morning, the gate operated differently. The casual disrespect was gone, replaced by professional courtesy. Good morning, Sergeant Major, personnel would say as they passed through. It's just Diana, she'd reply. No ma'am, it's not. Colonel Hayes offered her a position as base security chief. Diana declined. I like working the gate. It's quiet. It lets me watch and protect without having to be in command. But your experience here is available when needed. But my preference is checking IDs and staying alert. Although she refused promotion, Diana began offering informal security training to anyone who asked respectfully. Sergeant Major, Corporal Martinez approached her one day. Would you teach me how to spot threats like you do? Why? Because I want to learn from the best. Diana considered this. Threat assessment isn't about paranoia, it's about pattern recognition. I understand. Do you? Because the skills that stopped those terrorists took me 20 years to develop. The judgment to use them took longer. She gestured toward the checkpoint. Show me how you process a suspicious vehicle. Word of Diana's informal training sessions spread. Security personnel, MPs, even some officers began asking for instruction. 6 months later, the gate had become an unofficial training center. Diana still worked as a security guard, but now she also taught advanced threat detection. The most important lesson, she told her students, isn't how to stop threats. It's how to see them coming. How do we develop that awareness, Sergeant Major? By remembering that enemies don't announce themselves. They look like everyone else until the moment they act. Rodriguez had become one of her most dedicated students. The shock of learning who she really was had taught him humility. Sergeant Major, how do you stay so calm under fire? By remembering that panic gets people killed. Training keeps them alive. Is that why you didn't call for backup immediately? I called for backup, but I also knew those terrorists would be gone or successful before help arrived. Sometimes you have to act with what you have. New personnel arriving at the base were briefed about Diana during security orientation. The guard at Checkpoint 1, supervisors would say, she's the most experienced counterterrorism operator on this base. Treat her accordingly. Most figured it out quickly when they saw officers asking for her tactical advice. Young soldiers would sometimes ask her about her career. Sergeant Major, what was your most dangerous mission? The one where we prevented something terrible from happening and nobody ever knew about it. Are there a lot of missions like that? That's the nature of special operations. Success is measured by disasters that never happen. 2 years after the attack, Diana was offered a position training Delta Force candidates. She declined. Why? Hayes asked. This is a chance to train the next generation of elite operators. I already am, Diana replied, gesturing toward the checkpoint where her students were processing vehicles with new awareness. But at the training center, I'd be preparing people for war. Here, I'm preventing wars from reaching our doorstep. She picked up her scanner. Besides, someone has to guard the gate. New guards often asked Diana what made effective security. Is it weapons training, Sergeant Major? Weapons are tools. They're only as good as the person using them. What about physical fitness? Fitness helps, but the most important quality in security work is the ability to see what others miss. How do we develop that? By understanding that your job isn't to look tough or intimidating. Your job is to be the last line of defense between threats and the people you're protecting. She would pause in her work. The most dangerous enemies often look the most harmless. They count on you making assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't. On her 3rd anniversary at the gate, Diana was approached by a young MP who'd just completed basic training. Sergeant Major, everyone says you're the best soldier on the base. Everyone's wrong, ma'am. The best soldier is the one who prevents fights before they start. I spent 26 years hunting terrorists. Now I stop them at the gate. What's the difference? Hunting is reactive. Protection is proactive. She handed him a clipboard. Help me log these vehicles. Real operators take care of the details that keep everyone safe. That evening, Diana locked up the checkpoint and walked to the parking lot. Tomorrow, she'd be back at the gate, ready to check IDs and watch for threats, ready to teach young soldiers that the most important battles were often fought by people who never fired a shot, that vigilance was more valuable than violence, and that the deadliest warriors were sometimes the ones who looked least dangerous. In her locker, she kept photos from her Delta Force service, classified operations in countries that didn't appear on maps, teammates who hadn't made it home. But her proudest accomplishment was the morning when General Williams visited and left safely because someone at the gate had been paying attention. The security guard who stopped 5 terrorists, the sergeant major who chose protection over recognition, the warrior who found purpose in prevention. Exactly who she chose to be.